It is, of course, completely presumptuous of me to dare to write and broadcast a video entitled Message to the Christian Churches, but I'm going to do it anyway because I have something to say and because that something needs to be said.
So I want to give my thoughts on this video from Jordan Peterson, Message to the Christian Churches, that he would address it. And I'm going to react to some of the clips from this, but I also want to talk about what I believe is the real issue when it comes to the Christian church, when it comes to reaching those people, and what the real issue, at least from my view, is, and how it ties into the church's inability to reach men. So we're going to react to this video, and I'm going to give you all my thoughts on what the church really needs to hear in this time pertaining to the issue that he outlined. Before we do me a quick favor, like this video, subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, hit that notification bell. So let's get into this clip.
I've been speaking to and watching and listening to audiences all over the Western world for the past 4 years, in person and in virtual form, and I've learned a few things in consequence. It all started in some sense with the lectures I did on Genesis in 2017. My family and I took a risk and rented out a theater in Toronto on the off chance that there might be an audience for what might be described as a psychological approach to our ancient stories. And lo and behold, and miracle of miracles, there was. I completed 15 or so lectures walking through the first biblical book, sold out the theater, and attracted, surprisingly, millions of viewers, Christians, Jews, Muslims, and atheists. And most of the people who attended live, and the majority of those who watched online, were young men. The Christian church is there to remind people, young men included, and perhaps even first and foremost, that they have a woman to find, a garden to walk in, a family to nurture, an ark to build, a land to conquer, a ladder to heaven to build, and the utter terrible catastrophe of life to face stalwartly in truth, devoted to love, and without fear. Invite the young men back. Say, literally, to those young men, you are welcome here. If no one else wants what you have to offer, we do. We want to call you to the highest purpose of your life. We want your time and energy and effort and your will and your goodwill. We want to work with you to make things better, to produce life more abundant for you and for your wife and children and for your community and your country and the world. And we have our problems in the Christian church. We're moribund and sometimes far too often corrupt and sometimes deeply so. We're outdated, as are all institutions with their roots in the dead but still often wise past. So join us. We'll help fix you up and you can help fix us up. And together, we'll aim up. And here's a message to those young men skeptical about such things. What else do you have? You can abandon the churches in your cynicism and disbelief. You can say to yourself, narcissistically and solipsistically, the church does not express what I believe properly. Who cares what you believe? Why is this about you? Do you even want it to be about you? What if it was about others? What if it was about your duty to the past and to the broader community that surrounds you in the present? What if it was incumbent upon you and vital to your health and willingness even to live, to rescue your dead father from the belly of the beast, where he has always resided, and to restore him to life? Once again, to the churches, Protestant, you're the worst at the moment. Catholic, Orthodox,
What is
invite young men. Put up a billboard. Say, young men are welcome here. Print some flyers and put them in a box by the billboard. Signal the existence of those flyers with an arrow with the words, more information about attending here.
Let me stop it. Okay. We're going to talk about some of this. There's a lot of stuff that sounds good. There's some things that are introspective. I'm not sure I'm vibing with his prescription to the church in this message. I'm not sure I'm vibing with it, mainly because it's such a garbage solution that's completely devoid of a true understanding of theology, but even just practicality. Assuming, I think he's making one super false assumption, is that people aren't doing or showing men value. I mean, it feels like he missed out on an entire reformed movement where they were just going out of their way to pander to men and masculinity and manliness and saying it's okay to be manly men and be Christian. And we saw some of how that backfired ultimately and how some of it became more toxic and not as helpful. We saw that with the Mars Hill situation. I think he starts off with an interesting point about how many young men came to hear one of his lectures dealing with religion and just the interest in these things, which I talked about in my previous video, how it's very interesting how many people are responding positively to his talks. on it. And he's not a pastor. He doesn't have any credentials in theological studies. However, he likes to talk about theology and he likes to talk about certain theological things. But he's not an expert by any means in that field at all. He's very much not a credible speaker when it comes to theology and the church and all of that. And he starts off saying it's presumptuous for him to even be speaking. If you grew up in the era of the internet and online community, especially in the rise of YouTube, the rise of Twitter, social media, and all of that, one thing that I noticed just in reflecting in myself is that young men are trying to understand this world, the world around them. They're trying to understand these things. They're looking for someone to lead them. They're looking for someone to give them guidance. They're looking for someone to give them answers and help them to find purpose, understanding the world around them and how they can step up to the plate, or at the very least hear some level of critique of the world in these things, which is why someone like Jordan Peterson probably has a huge following of young men that really enjoy his content. Those young men are also preoccupying YouTube. They're all over YouTube. If you look at political discourse, that's men. I guarantee you, if you look at most of Christian YouTube, the Christian YouTubers, their audiences, it's going to be predominantly men. It's going to be probably upwards of 65 to 80%. And I heard 80% men, 20% men was a good number for politics. So in religion, it's probably still over 65, 70% of men occupying the space of YouTube, because men really enjoy hearing these different conversations and topics when it comes to religion, politics, all these things to help you make sense of the world around you. So it's no surprise there. What I believe is there is a lack of fatherhood when it comes to specifically, and I'm going to focus on this country in particular because I'm an American, so it makes sense, and I'm a Black American, but there is an issue of fatherlessness that I think ties into the young men, and it also ties into them not having the example. And so there's a lot of people that do not have an understanding. Their view of belief comes from examples that are largely women. 1 in 4 children grow up in single parent households. And I believe that number could be as high in most recent data as 35%, which is crazy. So over 1/4 of children, 1 in every 4 children grew up in a single parent household. I grew up in a single parent household. And one of the things that I don't think it's explicitly, but implicitly, that young men who don't have fathers or an abundance of male role models around is they tend to look in different places than the church for male influences. And some churches have it and some don't. But here's the other thing too that I think ties in. So the church isn't necessarily, there are men in the church. There are men that can be influential role models to young people, especially in pointing them to Christ and to something and finding purpose. But the issue I find is there's so much in the more Protestant. One thing I will say that the Protestant church fails in, especially when we look at it in the context of America, is there's so much to be divided on. There's so much hypocrisy. There's so much that people are not able to unify on that are just mainly secondary issues. There are petty things. There's hypocrisy. There's wickedness. There's so much that clouds what we really are supposed to do, that those men that are in place a lot of times aren't even fully walking in their purpose. So the issue we have is the older men and the hypocrisy in some of these institutions that people in my generation, a lot of younger men, are sniffing out and deciding they don't want to be a part of. They're not just going with the flow. They're not just trying to get in where they fit in. They're rebelling. They rebel. They're trying to find understanding elsewhere. The minute they see something, the minute they poke one hole in something, the minute they pull on one thread and see how much comes loose, they just keep pulling, and then until they don't even have any true grounding in faith or a desire for it. And I think that's a huge issue with the American church when it comes to young men, is I don't think that they're really getting much buy-in from young men in the way that Jordan Peterson is talking about. I believe there's young men in it, but the type of buy-in to where we're influencing more, the reason why I think someone like him is, even though his solution is terrible, it's just completely baseless and not really helpful. But I think the reason why people like him isn't because he's out saying, hey, this is for you. I don't think that's what he's doing. But I do think he's talking about things that help people make sense of beliefs that they have in the world around them. And he does so in a way that feels very intelligent. It feels that it doesn't just counter intellect. And that's another thing that I think really plays a role in a lot of young men and their struggle with having a relationship with the church and with God, is that it seems anti-intellectual. And I think that's a huge error of the Christian church, because we, in an effort to be sola scriptura, we've neglected intellect and the importance of science and all these other things. You don't have to be anti-science to be biblical, because the Bible, I don't believe, contradicts science. I think, in fact, that science confirms many things that the Bible talks about. It doesn't always, science isn't always necessary. There are certain theories that don't line up with scripture they're just that, theories, and theories can be wrong, but there's a lot of scientific things and scientific realities that is very congruent with the Bible. So, but the lack of intellectualism in the church, and also critical thinking, sometimes not understanding the delineation between faith and works, and understanding our salvation is not by works, but understanding that faith without works is dead, and that we can have faith, but it also has to line up with actions. And that's why I love, and I talked about this in the previous video where Jordan Peterson talked about belief, and I thought it was very interesting how this example here was used, where it says, if a brother or sister is naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you says to them, depart in peace, be warmed and be filled, but you did not give them the things which are needed for the body, what does it profit? How are you helping a person? If there are people that are in need of help, and you're saying, oh, I hope everything will be well with you, I'll pray for you, and if that's all you can offer is prayer, but there's not true action. Now, there are churches that do amazing things, but there are also churches that don't. There are also churches that will happily pray for you, but won't happily serve. Like, there's a lot of that, not just churches, but also Christians that fall victim to that too. But I think it's very important that our faith be shown through good works, because we're saved unto good works, not through good works, but unto good works, which means we're saved to do the work of God, to do the work of ministry, to be the hands and feet of Jesus, the body of Christ. And so, revisiting that scripture again and going back to this point, which is young men, they want to see this. They don't want to just hear it. They want to see. They want to see purpose enacted. People talk about finding their purpose, but they need examples of purpose being embodied, and also not in a hypocritical way and not in a hateful way, in a way that someone can easily see and admire. Like, I believe that people should see Christians, and it doesn't mean that they always have to agree. They may strongly disagree, but there should be it should be very clear that we are who we say we are. It should be very clear that we're not hypocrites. It should be very clear what we're about and the fruit that we bear. We have a lot of fruit to show. We should be able to say, hey, because of my faith, I did this, 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 and this. Not to be saved, but because God rescued me, this is what I've done. Not just in preaching the gospel, but living out the gospel and being there for people. And then understanding too, here's the other thing. Like I said, the statistic, 1 out of every 4 kids grow up in a single parent household. Some of these women aren't widows. However, they are single parents, and they may not have the type of male support. They may not have the type of man. They don't have that perspective to offer to their kids. And so we need more men to mentor. That's where mentoring will come in. That's where you have more men that step up to the plate and serve and help families out. There's so much more that we can do as men. And I don't necessarily think it's just a matter of telling men, hey, the church is available. Higher purpose is available. I think we have to show it. I think we have to be an example. And I think we have to lead the conversation. I think we can be men. I think we can show men something that's real, that's not super mushy, that doesn't have to be like what the stereotypical Christians type stuff is. It doesn't have to be corny or anything like that. But I think it could be something that's legit, that's authentic, that comes from an authentic place that God has birthed in us. And I also think it could be something that can really change lives. So those are my thoughts on this. I have so much more to say, but those are just my initial thoughts from watching his clip. Would love to hear your thoughts. Make sure you leave a comment. If you haven't already, hit that thumbs up on this video. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this and the last video. And if you missed it, you can go ahead and watch that video right now.
Aggressive with the message when I finesse. Yeah. Been trying to be a blessing since adolescence. Let's go. Been trying to serve the master with all my messes and kicking it cause I'm messy, but always getting contested.